You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network.
Hello there, and welcome back to Force Perspectives. This is the first episode, part one of our Obi-Wan Kenobi Retrospective. I am your host, of course, Michael Cohen, and joining me for our Obi-Wan Retrospective, my steadfast co-host, Marty Aleman. Marty, welcome back to Force Perspectives. You were recently on an episode of our Mando recaps, but after that we were talking about it, and I was like, I need a co-host for this Obi-Wan thing that I want to do. Do you want to do all 6 episodes? And you were totally down. So thank you for hanging out with me and talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi 1 year later, 1 year after the show.
1 year later. Thank you so much for having me, Mike. I'm so happy and just thankful for you accepting me, and I'm just happy that this is just fun. I'm almost glad that you kind of quit podcasting, or at least had that semi hiatus, I guess.
Yeah.
When it came to Obi-Wan, because I've always wanted to talk to you just about it, and because I always wanted to, more importantly, hear your perspective on your favorite character in everything. Obi-Wan's your favorite character, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And not just Star Wars, but we're talking like everything, right?
I mean, I would say yeah. It's pretty hard to argue it when I look around the room that I'm sitting in, or I walk around my house, or I look at the ring that is currently on my finger. Um, I Crystal and I got married 13 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was significantly, let's say, thinner back then. And one thing that people don't tell you as you get older, your hands actually get bigger. So
Yep.
my wedding ring doesn't fit me anymore. And like my actual gold wedding ring, it hasn't for quite some time. So I have an Enso Star Wars ring. This is the first one or not the first one that I got. This is the second one that I got, but the first Star Wars one that I got, and it's an Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's his lightsaber. So I'm currently
That's
wearing
awesome.
that. I've got my starring Ewan McGregor t-shirt on from Super Yaki, which is one of my favorite. Actually, you know what? I'll just go ahead and say it is my absolute favorite t-shirt. Both in terms of like what it is, because it just says starring Ewan McGregor in the Star Wars blue font, right? So it's like such a subtle Star Wars shirt. But then also like Super Yaki, oh my god, these t-shirts are so nice. Their t-shirts are such good quality. My god, I just got the introducing Kihan Kue I from Temple of Doom, because they just recently did that shirt.
That's
So
awesome.
I got that. I haven't worn it yet because I'm saving it for the Indie premiere for Indie
Of
5.
course.
But yeah, that's the
And
second
they're
shirt
called
that I
Super
bought from them.
Aki?
But
Sorry? They're called
Super
Super Aki?
Yaki, yeah, super
Super
like
Yaki.
SUPERYAKI. Super
And
Yaki.
they're today's sponsor. No.
They are not a sponsor of the show. I am just a happy customer. But
That's
I've got that
awesome.
on, and I literally, like, I put these clothes on this morning. Like, I have a bunch of different rings to choose from every day, and I put this ring on, I put this t-shirt on, and I was not thinking about the fact that we were recording tonight. It was just a Monday, and I just wanted to wear my Obi-Wan Kenobi stuff. But then I look around my office, and I've got Obi-Wan's on my desktop right now. Galactic Adventures, or what, Galaxy of Adventure.
Yeah.
A screenshot from that of Obi-Wan and Vader on the Death Star. I've got, let's see, there's a Lego Obi-Wan. You remember when they did the action figures, like the Lego action figures for a little while there? I've got
Yeah,
the
a little bit.
Obi-Wan there. the Force Effects lightsaber right behind him, and then when I look up, I've got the two Obi-Wans from the show of the mission fleet, the smaller figures that they do,
I know
the
exactly what
little
you're
like
talking about. Yeah,
cartoony ones. And then I've also got the Clone Wars style Obi-Wan. Like I literally actually have all of the Obi-Wans that they've done for mission fleet. Um, and then the Disney Store toy box Obi-Wan from the series is next to him, and then when I
that's
look
great.
over at the big case, I've got the Mythos Obi-Wan statue that is really like the basis for this show, right? Um, that great mythos that they did, that's sort of the blend between Alec Guinness and Ewan McGregor, and he's got
I
the
love that.
backpack with the
Yes,
armor pieces on it and the goggles and all the kit and whatnot. It's
I
a
remember
beautiful,
seeing
beautiful
that.
statue.
Yeah, I remember seeing that at Star Wars Celebration 2015 when I met you in person,
Yeah.
and it was one of those items that I've always loved, I've always appreciated, and just never had the space or the money for.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
looking around my room, I have a Force Effects Obi-Wan lightsaber.
Mhm.
Since we're going down this path, but I think that my best thing that I have right now is a couple stills of Clone Wars era Obi-Wan Kenobi signed by James Arnold Taylor.
Oh, that's
So
fantastic.
yeah, because we
Yeah.
got to meet him and Ashley Eckstein at Star Wars Weekends in 2014 over in Disney World, and that was remarkable. That was just amazing. So I don't have quite as big a collection as you do, but again, more to the point, like you had went on a hiatus too,
Yeah.
and I remember what you said, and it was to basically you wanted to enjoy the show Obi-Wan
Mhm.
because you want to get away from just all the discourse that was kind of happening in our
Yeah.
community, and I think that was wise. It was a very Jedi thing for you to do, and what a perfect way to kind of retrospect, a year later,
Yeah.
this show, and without all the discourse, without all the toxicity that came, and
Mhm.
not all of it was negative. There's a lot of positives about the show, but I'd be remiss to say that of course, there was some toxicity that happened, and it's so great to kind of be beyond that now. So I'm really excited to get to speaking to you about this.
Yeah. Yeah. I posted on Instagram earlier today actually that like I not doing it at the time. I it's like, oh, are we posting these a year later? Is this exactly when we were supposed to? Like, was this the plan all along? And the thing with that is that if I had done it at the time, I don't know, it probably would have been me and Joe, and we would have done our usual sort of back and forth banter on our reaction sort of thing to it. But now we get to go back and we get to watch it and we get to talk about it as a whole, knowing exactly where this goes. I mean, this will be, I think, my fourth or fifth time watching through the series. Um, so like I know the series pretty well. That said, starting it tonight and then sort of getting some of the album artwork prepped and stuff like that, and going through images and stuff, I was like, oh yeah, that happens, and that all happens in the first three episodes, huh? And then the fourth episode is that's interesting. Like it there's a lot to cover. There's going to be a lot for us to talk about in these six episodes. It's and it's actually all very expertly connected. I think it works better as a complete piece than it does sort of in its individual parts, which is
Hmm.
which is my um sort of my broad view of it a year later, versus how I would think I reacted to it in the moment. Now, if you want to hear what I said, like literally day of, like literally like before I even went to sleep that night, you can go listen to Marie Claire and I talk about it on What the Force, because my first viewing of this episode was at Star Wars Celebration. So
Oh no!
it's
Wow.
Yeah, like at the premiere, right? Like at like the official red carpet premiere, which was part of Star Wars Celebration, which everybody who was at the big panel that morning got to come back and go to it. And yeah.
That's awesome.
So I mean, I watched this episode for the first time along with, you know, a few thousand other people in the same room with Ewan and Hayden and like a bunch more of the cast, right? So I it's and you know, Deborah Chow and all sorts of other Star Wars celebrities. So
Just a few names to
um
drop, right?
yeah, just kind of a big deal. And earlier that day, we had gotten, you know, I mean, I was, I don't know, 100 feet away probably from John Williams conducting an orchestra performing the Obi-Wan Kenobi theme for the first time to the public. This was uh, moments, I can't remember before or after. I think it was after, moments after Harrison Ford had been on stage to talk about Indy 5. So uh yeah, I mean, like that day is a little bit of a blur. It's a little bit, it's one of those things where it's like I can't even really recount the experience a year later, because it was just like, what is happening? Right, they like all that stuff that was announced, all of the stuff that we got to see. We got to see Mando season 3, like a really great chunk of it. Got to see some Andor. Got to see we got to see Ahsoka in that panel. All
Mm,
this stuff that like that the general public didn't get to see, it was only in that room, right? A couple of images from Skeleton Crew even at the time. It was wild. It was a crazy day, and it was the first day of celebration. Um, and yeah, man, it was crazy. So you can go and you can listen to me talk to Marie Claire at midnight that night after we had seen, I think, because I think we got to see the first 2 episodes, right, that they premiered the first 2 together,
I believe
right?
so. Yeah,
Yeah,
that felt like it was a two-parter
yeah,
premiere. Yeah,
and I think that we
you know
got to
what it
see the
was?
two.
They had the two premiere, and then I remember within like a calendar like week, within like 7 days, we had gotten half the season on Disney Plus. So it
Yeah,
was like we got the first 3 episodes, and then we had to wait every week for the following
yeah, because
three.
it was a Wednesday show, wasn't it? So
Right,
we had gotten it on Friday. We gotten the first 2 episodes on that
that's right,
Friday. Although I saw them on the Thursday, right?
right.
Because that was the first day of celebration. So we saw them that Thursday night. By midnight, they were up for everybody. And then I actually no, I think they put them up early. I think they had put them up at like 9 o'clock that night.
Yeah,
Like
that sounds more
basically
familiar.
like as soon
Yeah,
as we were done watching them at Celebration, they put them up. Um, and yeah, and then that following Wednesday we got the third episode. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, it was just um, it was huge. It was such a great moment. It was so great to share that with a bunch of other Star Wars fans. Um, like that was really special. To the extent that if you watch the behind the scenes, the gallery, the Disney gallery making of Obi-Wan, there's a shot of the crowd, and I'm in it. I'm not clearly visible. It's from pretty far away, but
right.
it's exactly like I know that it's me.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and it's like I know because I'm like, that's where I was sitting, and like as I was watching the special, it was like it's like that's totally where where Amanda and I were sitting, and then my lightsaber ignites, and I was like, oh yeah, that's me. That was me.
That's
That's my yellow lightsaber. So, um, yeah, it's like it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. The whole experience, but it is one of those things of just like, man, what even was that day? Because we got to walk down the red carpet, and there were costumes and stuff like that to take pictures with, and
that's
uh,
awesome.
yeah, and Ewan and Hayden introducing the uh, the the episodes. with Deborah Chow, and yeah, it was pretty special. So that was my first viewing experience. What was it like for you a year ago when you saw these 2 episodes? I mean, we're only going to talk about the first one. We're gonna
Yeah.
full 6 episodes for this miniseries. But what was your experience? You're just watching it at home, right?
I was watching it at home. It's funny because I feel like that so much of my personal life has changed in the last year
Mm-hmm.
that it actually took me a while. Like as you were talking about Celebration and just thinking back and how we were kind of just right now live on the air, we were kind of discussing like, is it, was it a week? Was it 1 episode? Was it 3 episodes? I was kind of remembering what we were going through back then, and I saw it, when it premiered, but it was definitely in a different circumstance to where I'm at now, and everything's good, but it's just one of those things where like watching it finally, because Obi-Wan means the world to me and my family. My wife, it's her favorite character as well, along with myself, and it's just one of those things where we've been waiting, in every incarnation, possible incarnation of this story. If it was going to be a movie, a trilogy, a series, a single movie, whatever it was going to be, we've been patiently waiting, like everyone else has. And when we finally got to that moment, it was just like, hey, we're finally here, and seeing him back, cutting up the desert whale meat, it was just like, there he is, it's back. And what's great is that, I think a little bit of Ewan McGregor's influence has, now it's kind of almost like taken over the kind of archetype of this character, where before it was, years ago, even before the Phantom Menace, it was Alec Guinness, of course, and he was the old wizard in the desert. And what I mean by that is that, when we get to 10 years into the future, he's been on this desert planet. He still looks like, I mean, yeah, Ewan McGregor, he may look like hasn't showered, like, that Jawa keeps telling him like, yeah, you stink, but he still looks so good.
Yeah.
No real salt and pepper hair, he still has the long locks, it's just looking great, looking like Ewan McGregor. And so of course that always, makes the wife happy, of course. But it's kind of amazing, the journey that this character has gone. And I always love how, we always find in our current mythology with Star Wars, where, we fall in love with a character and then maybe they die. This character has been around for, where we're at, almost 45 years now.
Yeah.
And he died in the first movie, and there's still more stories coming out with him. And so we were basically just basking in that kind of just the mythology of Obi-Wan and what this character means to us. And then in addition to, that, we also had actors like Joel Edgerton returning, and seeing him reprise the role. And like, what a slam dunk Lucas did 20 years ago, where he cast this amazing actor in this relatively bit part. I think he may have had maybe 5 or 6 lines in Attack of the Clones, and had won 3 shots in Revenge of the Sith. And what Joel Edgerton has become now, and actor, writer, director, just kind of amazing to see him, grow, and like all these actors just grow into the characters that we fell in love with. And then also seeing these new characters, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, but for this first episode, just getting back into that world, and it definitely really truly felt like, even though you got the original trilogy, you got the prequel trilogy, this really felt like a truer sequel to the prequel trilogy, if that makes sense. And then what did you think of? I will throw this to you. The opening kind of intro, where it kind of recaps the entire prequel trilogy. What did you think when you first saw that? Did that come up in Star Wars Celebration?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
How did that feel in the giant ballroom?
Oh, I mean, like,
or was it the arena? I don't know.
it was the arena. Yeah.
Oh wow.
I mean, the screen was massive. The screen was absolutely massive. Um, and yeah, I mean, like there were cheers. It was, um, yeah, it was just like electric, right? Like watching with that many other fans, and all reacting to it. I think it heightened the entire thing. I'll tell you, watching it today in prep for this was the first time that I've watched it on my TV. Because the first time that I saw it was on that big screen. The second
Mm.
time that I watched it was on my iPad. I
Okay.
During Star Wars Celebration, like I think I watched it like the next night or something like that. And then I watched it again on the airplane. And then I've watched it, this first episode at least I've watched just like sort of off to the side on my monitor while I'm working.
Mm-hmm.
But it occurred to me as I was sitting there, like from the third episode onward, right? I watched all of them at home on my 70-inch HDR screen, right? Like sort of as good a viewing experience as you're going to get in a house, um, a home theater setup. I But yeah, the first two episodes I've watched primarily like via sort of other methods, um,
Mm.
which was really funny to like only now a year later realize like, oh, I've never sat and watched this on my TV, this first episode. uh but yeah, so like for me it's like that experience of watching it, with that massive crowd is is sort of the thing that sticks the most. um I mean, how could it not, right? Like
Yeah, that must have been
it's a
amazing.
pretty crazy way to watch it. But yeah, that intro is just so expertly cut, and just like gets through those three movies so perfectly, and you're just like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, it's
Reminds
like,
you just how much you love this version of the character,
mm,
um, which I think was important because I think like coming into this this portrayal, there was a need to go back and like refresh. This is Ewan's approach to the character, right? Because as you said, prior to Ewan playing the character, we really only got, you know, Obi-Wan in the first movie, and then he kind of makes these brief appearances in Empire and Jedi, mostly to just, apologize for all of the lying that he did in the first movie, justify things. I and tell Luke not to do stuff.
don't do
Um,
this. All right,
yeah,
you do
he's a bit of a wet
it.
blanket, but um, so he's like the Alec Guinness portrayal is really not that much screen time, and then but in the interim, we have gotten, I don't know, hundreds of hours of James Arnold Taylor between the Gendy Clone Wars. That's James, right?
Yes, it
Yeah,
is. It was his first job
yeah,
as
um,
as
yeah,
Obi-Wan. Sorry,
as
not his
Obi-Wan.
first actual job.
Yeah, and then I mean, like, James is Obi-Wan's voice in the video games. Whether it's, there was a Clone Wars video game, not a lot of people remember it, I
I
don't
love
think,
that game.
but there was yeah, like it
I know
introduced
exactly which one you're talking about.
tanks, right?
Yep.
And then I think he's also the voice of Obi-Wan in the Galactic Battlegrounds video game, which is the RTS, and like there are hundreds of hours of James portraying this character. And it was during that period, during Clone Wars, that it really reinforced for me how much I love the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi, right from the beginning of that first movie, right? When when I can't remember the character's name, but the guy calls him the negotiator, and you're like, yeah, like, and that comes from one of the books, that comes from the Cestus Deception, right? That his nickname was the negotiator.
Right.
I and yeah, so there was just like, there was all of this time for us to fall in love with that character, but so much of it was fall deeper in love, I should say, because I've been in love with Ewan's Obi-Wan since Attack of the Clones. The Phantom Menace doesn't really give him that much to do, right? And it's only kind of in retrospect that you go, okay, he's doing pretty good stuff. But
Oh, see, I
but
loved him in Phantom Menace, to be
oh
honest.
yeah,
Yeah, well, Well, and then again, my wife influences me as well too
Yeah,
sometimes. But that was where I think she had her first childhood like real crush too, of course,
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
clean shaven, he was young and everything. But I mean that as a young man, just the Darth Maul fight and just that one shot
yeah,
where it's that wide shot with it's the two of them, and it's the two actors actually doing it. It was just very informative, when you're like 12, 13 years old.
totally.
But I see what you're talking about with that Attack of the Clones, because he actually went off on his own adventure.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it was really Clone Wars for me that solidified it as like Obi-Wan is one of my favorite characters. And then sort of over time it's like, no, Obi-Wan is my favorite character. No, Obi-Wan's like my favorite character in pretty much everything. Um I was like to say that it's like that it's I sort of have a like my own personal trinity of characters, and it's Obi-Wan, Superman, and Iron Man.
Yeah.
Which the funny thing is that like the Iron Man thing, Tony Stark is only since 2008, right? But those three characters have become like super important to me in the way that I just like live my life, and they sort of represent three eras of my life, because there's sort of the Superman from when I was a little kid, um, all the way through, right? Through till Smallville. But
Hmm.
then like sort of that same era is when Obi-Wan kind of comes in, and he carries me through to the Clone Wars.
Hmm.
Like that's sort of my Star Wars era, and then sort of later on, because not immediately when Iron Man comes out, but like as we get into like the Avengers and stuff, it's like I really started to identify as an adult with that Iron Man character. So I kind of look at those three characters as these three sort of phases of my life, and I and then this show comes along. Before we get too deep into it, I just want to give some of the stats for the episode.
Yes, please.
So this first episode, the episodes don't have titles; they're just part 1 through 6. So part 1, which aired May 27th, 2022. And we are currently talking about this on May 29th. So we're technically 2 days late, and you guys will be listening to this on the 30th. Um, but hey, we're already a year late, so it's a couple more days. Directed by Deborah Chow, and the writers credited on this one are Joby Harold, Hossein Amini, and Stuart Beatty. And of course, it is starring Ewan McGregor, amongst others. Amongst others, I mean, let's just shout out Moses Ingram in an amazing debut performance. As you mentioned, Joel Edgerton in this episode. We've also got Sung Kang as the fifth brother, and Rupert Friend as the Grand Inquisitor. And of course, introducing our new Leia, Vivian Lyra Blair, in a performance that just like absolutely steals the entire thing. I mean, like going into an Obi-Wan Kenobi series, uh, this was the last thing that I think anybody expected, and yet, I like what an amazing gift. This is my biggest takeaway. And anytime I hear anybody say anything negative about this show, this is what I always go back to: is we all thought we knew what we wanted an Obi-Wan Kenobi show to be.
Hmm.
And I think that we all figured we had this pegged from the beginning. It's like, oh, he's going to be in hiding, and then the Inquisitors are going to find him. They're going to draw him out, and then eventually he's going to have another confrontation with Vader. I don't know how that's going to last 6 episodes, though. And then you're sitting and you're watching this episode, and we get all of this introductory stuff, these Inquisitors, and they're hunting this Jedi, and it's not Obi-Wan, it's a different Jedi, Benny Safdie's character, Nari. And I Obi-Wan's this hermit, and he's reluctant, and he will not be a hero because he's got to protect Luke. And then we get this, like, it's not a smash cut, and yet like when I watch it, it's always this jolt of like, hey, we're on Alderaan.
Yeah.
And I remember that night in that
Oh man, I
arena
could only imagine.
auditorium,
Oh, how did that
sitting
feel?
next to Amanda and turning to her like the second that we saw Alderaan, before it even revealed the girl who is not the red herring,
Yeah.
this girl getting dressed up as Leia. I turned to Amanda and I went, well, what other reason are you going to give him to leave Tatooine? Right? Because we knew that he would leave Tatooine. Like, we knew that that was going to be a part of it because we knew we'd seen Dayu and uh, we'd kind of been given these hints, right?
Hmm.
And I just turned to Amanda and I was like, well, like, what other reason could there possibly be to leave Luke than to have to rescue Leia? Like, like the second that we saw Alderaan, it all became so incredibly clear to me. But it wasn't until we started to get a little bit of the performance from Vivian Lyra Blair that I was like, my God, this is one of the most special stories that we've gotten in Star Wars. Now I'm also gonna sort of add to that this is directed specifically at me, like this but this is one of the joys of the show, is that it's like they made this Star Wars show, they made this Obi-Wan Kenobi show for me, right? And I know that there are a lot of other fans that also applies to, but like this was so specifically targeted, to the degree that, like, I kid you not, like, massive Star Wars fans and casual Star Wars fans alike, anybody who spent any amount of time with Kara, my older daughter, I have two, right? Kara is 6 and Cassie is 3. Sorry, 6.5 and 3.5. They'd be very upset if I said 6 and 3. Sorry if I got away with that.
You
Oh,
can
I was
always
doing
edit
pretty
that
good.
out.
But I'm just getting over a sinus thing, so I apologize for that. But um, anybody who spent any amount of time with Kara has said to me after watching this show, or like really while it was airing, I was like, that's her, like that's your daughter. I'm like, listen, I'm not gonna disagree, because I hope that Kara has a little bit of Princess Leia in her. But it being an adventure, Obi-Wan and Leia, I was just and this portrayal, this interpretation of Leia is like, oh my God, like this is very, very specifically for me, who identifies as Obi-Wan Kenobi a lot of the time, and me going on my stupid adventures with my sassy goofball daughter. Um, yeah, it just felt like a bullseye was painted directly on my heart, and they nailed it. Like, it just, I don't know. It's a very difficult thing for me to describe. Um,
I
there
can
are a
understand what
lot
you're
of
talking about, though. Yeah,
yeah
it's crazy because like you have this feeling that like, did someone write this for me? And I felt
yeah
that a couple times in where like in media and whatnot, where you like say you're watching a movie that you really like, and then like maybe like what if in the sequel X, Y, and Z happen, and then
yeah.
like maybe years later X, Y, and Z actually do happen. I'm like, hey, is my finger on the pulse or something? But on this level, it's like almost like supernatural because it involves your daughter. So I could
Mhm.
understand that.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. So um yeah, do you want to get into, like, let's sort of, we're not going to fully recap the episode, but let's
Okay.
just kind of go with the major beats, right? Um,
You
we've
want to
talked
start
a
at the
little.
very beginning or
Yeah.
just
We'll start at the very beginning. So we haven't, because we've talked a lot about Obi-Wan, we've talked a little bit about Leia, and we haven't really talked that much about the Inquisitors, which are a very, very big part of this story.
yes,
Riva in particular, the third sister, yeah, third sister.
third sister, yeah.
Um, and again, a debut performance from Moses Ingram. This is her first major on-screen role,
Yes.
and I I mean, like, again, you want to talk about somebody stealing the show, like coming into a series about Obi-Wan Kenobi, you would really think that he would be the main focus for someone like me. And yet it's really like Riva's story and Leia's story, and actually the way that they reflect one another is the heart of the story for me. Obi-Wan obviously has an arc and goes on his own journey through this, but it's almost um his inaction is his stagnation is broken by these two incredible forces that come into his life at the same time, right? These two women that pull him in different directions. And I yeah, I mean, like to have somebody come into Star Wars and it be their first major on-screen role, and to stand toe to toe with these like monolithic characters. I mean, Obi-Wan is not simply Obi-Wan, right? Like, Obi-Wan is a character that means something in pop culture. He means something mythologically to us. Like, he's like, that character is deeper and broader than just the role that he plays in the films that he's in, or the TV shows, or any of that stuff, right? Like he's a deep and meaningful character. And then on the other side of Riva is Vader, who is exactly the same thing, right? I mean, like Obi-Wan and Vader are these opposite sides of the same argument. Um and both hold this incredible weight in our popular culture and in modern myth and all of that. I mean, like they're just such important characters. And for her to come in and just play in that sandbox and actually like hold her own, I I don't know. I am so surprised that she has not been cast in a million things since then. Um, and I am curious. Like, sort of what she's got coming up and that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
like, like just like such an amazing performance from the get go, um, alongside Rupert Friend as the Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah.
Um,
Would you want to talk about the Inquisitors? I mean, I know you're talking about Riva in particular.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I can't agree more about Moses. I think she had like a banger of a first episode.
yeah,
My favorite scene with her is where she goes toe to toe with Owen out in the
yeah,
market,
yeah,
and she's just threatening everyone, and she is threatening everyone, and you just fear for everyone. And even though you know that Owen will at least survive this day,
mm-hmm.
that you still fear for what could happen or what could possibly happen because of her
Yeah,
performance. And I never understood what the backlash with her, if we wanted to talk about that slightly. But I mean, honestly, like,
yeah.
I don't care
I
about the
mean, the
backlash.
backlash is very simple, right? You have two factors here with this character
Right.
that are immediately going to, in the current climate that we're in, and I hope that this changes over the next few years, but who knows? But the current climate that we're in, she is a black woman,
Yeah.
and so like is therefore a target for a certain subset of people. Certainly, I would hope no one listening to this podcast, if you are listening to this podcast and you were one of those people, you can kindly turn it off. We don't need your downloads. See you later.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, because like racism, I think, is number one, and then a nice heaping helping of misogyny for number two on the backlash to this character. Because, like, listen, that scene that you're talking about exactly, she comes in and I she is scary in a way that Vader isn't scary. So Vader's scary in a way of he is imposing, he's threatening. You understand how dangerous he is because of the way that he looks and the way that he moves and the way that he talks, right? But
And breathes, yeah, sounds, yeah,
with
exactly, yeah.
Reva, she's like a caged animal. There's an unpredictability to it that's even more dangerous, right? That is just like terrifying, because Vader is scary in this very controlled, very powerful way, right?
Uh-huh.
And there's nothing you can do about it, so you just have to like kind of succumb to that fear with that character. With Reva, um, like there's an instability to the performance, and the thing that I love the most about it is the way that Sun Kang, as the fifth brother, plays off of that. And there are all these great reaction shots of him, I unsure of how to deal with the situation,
Right.
and then sort of like coming to realizations of sort of physicality and intimidation is the only thing that he's got against her. Is that he is literally a more physically imposing presence, so he uses that. The other aspect of it on this rewatch that I think I took note of more than anything is the fact that these characters are actually Jedi. They're not Sith. The Inquisitors are all Jedi that have been turned post Order 66, right? So
Right.
um, they all actually have these tendencies. All of the stuff that the Grand Inquisitor, is talking about, of the like itch that they can't scratch, that they need to scratch, I that is actually underneath all of the Inquisitors' performances as well. They're not pure evil in the way that Darth Maul or Dooku or Palpatine or Vader are, right? Like where they've completely succumbed to the dark side and like given themselves over, and in exchange been given this incredible amount of power, which has made them even more evil, right?
Correct.
Like that corruption is complete and full. With the Inquisitors, there's it's really interesting how consistent it has been. With the Inquisitors, there's a betrayal with every single one of them in their stories. There's a betrayal that leads to the dark side. And sometimes it's a perceived betrayal in the instance of Reva, and we'll talk about that as we get further on into the series. But we don't really know the fifth brother's backstory. I we don't really know like how he became an inquisitor, sort of what his tragedy is.
Mm.
And yet there are moments in Sun Kang's performance in this episode where we really get these glimpses of, she's ready to just kill Owen, and he stops her. Because he's following orders, so there's a bit of a fear of the Grand Inquisitor, certainly a fear of Vader, and not overstepping their mandate, right? Which is a very Jedi ethos. But there is also a flicker, the faintest flicker of compassion in that character. In that, like when she cuts off the woman's hand, there's a moment of it, like he is upset by that because it's cruel. It's unnecessarily cruel, and that's not his MO. It's not how he does things. It's certainly how Reva does things. But he has these visceral reactions when she gets out of control. And I look at that and I go, like, that's the Jedi. Like that's not the Inquisitor. That's not the Dark Jedi. Like that's the good Jedi underneath the surface, trying
Right.
to take over. Which I really like that aspect of basically every Inquisitor that we've got, right? Because
The
they all
rebels and
have
everything. Yeah.
these backstories we learn as we go through of like, oh, it turns out that, you know, like we can understand, we can relate to why they become Inquisitors. So yeah, I really love that about those two characters. I think that the fifth brother in this is actually one of the most underrated characters, underrated performances, because it's very subtle. It's all subtext. There's nothing, because it's not his story, right? This story is about four characters. It's about Obi-Wan and Anakin primarily. And then it's about Leia, and then it's about Reva, right?
Reaver, yeah.
I but there are these other characters in the background of this show, like the fifth brother, like the Grand Inquisitor, like oh my god, we get so much of Breha Organa in this show, which is fantastic.
Yes.
And you know, later on, we get Indira Varma's character. I can't remember her character's name off the top of my head right now, but
I'll
her
go look
character
for
is such a great character. I you know,
Tala.
Tala, thank you. And again, we will talk at length when we get to the third episode. I have a lot to say, but third and fourth episode, but yeah, like there are a lot of these other characters in the background that just have these, like, you can tell that they even though it's not in the script, it's not in the story, it's not their story, that they have done the work and figured out what's going on behind this character. Why are they doing what they're doing? What's the motivation here? How did they get to this place? And I for me, that's the richness of this particular story. First episode does such a great job of setting that up. Um, we're kind of all over the place, right?
No, it's all good,
Let's
but you did bring up a really good point though, and
yeah.
I've thought about it a couple times, and we know it from watching Rebels, Jedi Fallen Order, that the, like what you said, the Inquisitors aren't really, they're dark side users,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, if I remember correctly, have we ever seen anyone, if we want to go like really down in the weeds of it, have we ever really seen any of them like use like Sith lightning or anything? I don't really think so. It's
No.
all just force powers and a red lightsaber,
Yeah.
double bladed,
Yeah.
saber. So they're, for lack of a better term, they're just dark side posers that are just
Yeah.
doing the bidding of Vader and Palpatine, mostly Vader though. And you bring up a really good point though, because it's, these guys aren't, they have that compassion. They have that fear. I mean, the dark side users already have that fear already, but it's way more on display. And it's more of, I've always liked the example of when it's like a behind the scenes story of when Sam Witwer was auditioning for Starkiller in Force Unleashed, where when he would, I guess the audition made him try to build a lightsaber, and when he was building this lightsaber, it was like he was using the Force, and he was very, very, like, just very angry and just sort of flexing and just using all his energy to make this lightsaber. And they kept asking him, like, over and over after multiple takes, asking him, like, why are you doing it that way? He's like, well, he was taught by Vader. He doesn't know how to actually use the Force properly by just
Hmm.
calming down and relaxing. It's almost like this is the opposite, almost a little bit of like Ben Solo, where it's like these are guys that use the dark side of the Force, but they are trying to like stay angry, stay on that side. And it's almost like, okay, well, I'm gonna scream, I'm gonna yell, I'm gonna do what I can, I'm gonna chop this woman's hand off. Okay, I'm angry, I'm dark side, like it's that kind of
Mm-hmm.
energy. And it's unhinged. It's like a caged animal that is loose, and the fifth brother just is trying to get that leash back on her.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no, it's a very good point, and I think it was lost on many, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, people didn't want to see it, right? Like those particular people didn't want to see it. So, um, yeah. And I think one of the problems with the Disney Plus Star Wars era is that um, you have a lot of eyes on it, right? I think there's a funny thing, having covered Clone Wars for so long. and then Star Wars Rebels even more so, and then to an even greater extent Resistance. I I and I would say even Bad Batch as well. Um, the accessibility of those shows was much lower because they are animated, because Clone Wars was on Cartoon Network, so not everybody's going to Cartoon Network to watch stuff. Rebels was on Disney XD, which is even more off the beaten path than
Yeah, it's way more obscure.
than that. And then rather than continue the Star Wars stuff on Disney XD, they hid Resistance on Disney Channel, and so you really didn't have that many people watching those shows. It was just the diehards, right? And kids.
Right.
So you end up with the discourse around those shows being much more like kids saying that they love Star Wars. Fantastic. No problems there, no issues. And then adult fans that want to dig into the stuff, that want to be there and be a part of the positive discourse, not toxically positive, but like that, but like looking for the good stuff, right? So I think that those shows, I mean, Rebels had a lot of detractors, but those people just didn't watch the show, so they weren't talking about it, right? Like at a
Right.
certain point after the first few episodes, they just like that just died down, and it was just those of us who loved it talking about it, with a smattering of dummies saying bad stuff about it. But I but with this stuff, with with the Mandalorian, with Book of Boba Fett, with Obi-Wan, Andor, and I'm sure that Ahsoka will be no different. You've got the general public, casual Star Wars fans coming into it that aren't as well versed. They haven't played Jedi Fallen Order. They don't know anything about the Grand Inquisitor from Star Wars Rebels. They don't know anything
Yeah.
about the Seventh Sister. This is the first time they're encountering the Grand Inquisitor and the Fifth Brother, even though these characters have, at this point that the show premieres, they'd been around for 5 or 6 years, right?
Yeah, several years for sure.
Um, and appeared in multiple pieces of media across
Comic
different
books, yeah.
things, like all sorts of stories with these characters. And yet, like, these people are being introduced to, so many people are being introduced to the idea of an Inquisitor in this show.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe perhaps the show takes that for granted a little bit. Not takes that for granted, but takes for granted us, the fans who've been there. I since the beginning of the the Disney Star Wars era, watching all of this content. And those of us who are very well versed in what an Inquisitor is. So those who were not, I think, like, they look at it and they go like, oh, so these guys are Sith, and it's like, well, they're not Sith. That's the thing, is that it's like there are only two Sith, right? So we gotta sorry, we
You're
have
good.
to to we have to do that work up front, a lot more work up front, in order to explain who these characters are and what they're about. I think
Wait,
the show did, for the general audience, fail to do that. If I can give it sort of the one criticism, I think it takes too long to get into what an Inquisitor is, how this character, because for those of us who get it, who know it, when we get this, the first scene in the show of Order 66, and we get these kids, these Padawans, younglings, trying to survive Order 66, and we get this girl saying like, oh, we run. That's what she says, right? I think so.
we run, yeah.
Which is obviously meant to be Riva, right? I
Actually, I
Those
don't
of us.
think Riva's the one that speaks. Actually, she's just there, and I
Is it
think
the
it's
other one?
a
Oh,
boy.
okay.
Yeah, it's a boy that says something, and then I think it's another girl that
Okay.
says we run, and Riva's just there,
Yeah, yeah.
reacting to everything because you
Yuma,
see the
right.
horror on her face and everything. But
Um,
yeah,
but we as like the Star Wars audience that has this past experience, I'm trying really hard to stay away from the idea of like us, like the hardcore true Star Wars fans. That's not what it is, right? There are like you can be a hardcore Star Wars fan and not have watched the animated stuff. That's fine, right? I think that you're missing out. I'll say that. Like that to me, the animated stuff is I mean, Star Wars Rebels is hands down the best Star Wars since Disney took over. It just is. And you know, there's a lot of episodes of the show, and you know, as with any TV show, it's going to be up and down when you've got that much content. But overall, that story is the only thing to me that comes anywhere near the original trilogy, right? Like it's the only thing. Obi-Wan gets pretty close to the heights of the prequel trilogy, and then sort of nips at the heels of the original trilogy, but is kind of its own thing.
Do you
But
think it
Star
was
Wars
wise for them
Rebels,
to?
sorry.
Do you think it was wise for them to start with the Inquisitors in this first scene?
Well,
Um,
that's sort of my thing, right? Is that like we know because we have all of this background information on Inquisitors and where they come from, and we've played Jedi Fallen Order and we've watched Rebels and read comic books and stuff to look at it and go like, mm, okay, so this is the beginning of Riva's fall to the dark side. Order
mm,
66 is you know, she was there in the temple. This is how this starts. And so then when we cut to the next scene and we get the Inquisitors walking down this ramp, it's like, okay, there they are, right? And we draw that connection. I don't know that the general audience draws that connection because they just don't have that understanding of who these characters are. And the problem here is that, you know, it's a 6-hour series essentially. I think it's just shy of that, right? But let's just refer to it as a 6-part 6-hour series. Um, Not a lot of people are going to go back and rewatch it, and I think that like these early scenes with Riva and the Inquisitors, they really have a lot more impact after you've watched the whole thing. You go back, there's a bunch of things that Riva says to Owen of like you know, like sort of like next time, or is like I love it. She says at one point, do you think you could defend your family from me? Like she's like
mm,
I which is great foreshadowing for the fact that at the end of the series that is exactly what he will do.
right.
um I mean, like I think that Baru does the lion's share of the work on that one,
Yeah, she
but
got a little bit of action on that one,
but
but
they will have a confrontation at the end of the season, right? So
yeah,
it's um sorry, it's it's like there's a lot of stuff that's like groundwork that's laid here that, you know, isn't apparent, I think, to the average viewer at the outset, but that upon
right.
rewatching, even I think even for us, upon rewatching, there's so many more layers and there's so much more depth to it. um but yeah, it wasn't I don't know if it was the best execution, but at the same time, how much of your 6 hours are you going to spend on explaining who and what the Inquisitors are? um
I
we
think
do
having
get quite a
maybe
bit, but it's just it's buried deeper in the series. It's in like the
yeah.
third and fourth episode, right? And so for a lot of people, they might have checked out by then, right?
I think personally, like just to have just a visual, because I'm always a fan of just the visual storytelling, and
Hmm.
going back to like I think we've talked about this a little bit privately, but just about the overall just budget of the show. We could kind of tell that this is one of those things where it may have gotten a little shortchanged. I feel like just kind of talking about it with you, like imagine if the first thing that we see, you could keep the scene exactly the way it is. Because I mean, it is said in the dialogue between him and the bar owner, like, you know, you guys hunt Jedi, blah, blah, blah. So it kind of established that for the general audience.
Yeah.
But to even further establish that these guys aren't necessarily Sith, but they're more leaning on the Imperial side, just have a battalion of stormtroopers come out first, you know, to like back the crowd up, and maybe they just couldn't have stormtroopers then. Maybe that just wasn't part of their, you know, plan, budget, and everything. But it is kind of stark when you see just this giant ship and just the three figures come out, and they are imposing, but I don't know, just these are like little subtle things where it kind of reinforces that this is not just a random faction of dark side users. This is Imperial. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that would have kind of come across a little bit farther, maybe earlier, not necessarily earlier scene in the series of just them and Vader, and maybe them training something to just kind of further reinforce like these guys hunt Jedi, and they do that to a certain extent. By the end of this episode, they do hunt a Jedi. They are, and what's kind of great is that they kind of lean into the audience expectation that, oh, they're hunting Obi-Wan. Well, not necessarily. Reva wants the big game, but there is another Jedi out there, and they're going after him, and he's kind of like the red herring, I guess. But they're going after him, and they're, you know what? I lost my point. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
but
It's all good.
but you know what I'm talking about, where they're just they're. I lost it. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's interesting. They kind of cut to the chase a little bit. They get right into it, and they do a lot of the um the setup as they go. But I do think this is the thing. They wanted to save Vader for the end of the second episode. They wanted to save the Purge troopers for when we go to the Inquisitorius, right? To the Castle Inquisitorius. So like, or Fortress Inquisitorius, sorry. And I think like though there were decisions like that were made for impact for us that I think, you know, like that I think is a better story. But I think that as somebody who has this global view of, we should say galactic view of Star Wars, and has this working knowledge of it throughout the eras, and and like general knowledge of essentially every aspect of it, right? So, and along with quite a lot of specific knowledge on things like Inquisitors, right? So it works for us. I think it worked really well for me. These are things that, like, again, the purpose of us talking about it now a year later is this is the retrospective, right? We're looking at it as a whole and trying to sort of see, you know, with the way that people reacted to it, like sort of what was going on there. And I do think like that. I think that is a big part of it. Is that when you're asking questions about who are these characters, why are they doing what they're doing, then you're missing the great things about the performance. And this all sort of stemmed from us talking about, you know, sort of, you know, there was the obvious racist and misogynistic backlash, but then there were a lot of general reactions of like, I don't know that I care for this Reva character. Like, why am I supposed to care about her? And it's like, well, because she's an inquisitor, and you know, and then people are going like, so what does that mean? So what, who cares? And I just think that like you know, had they not saved the Vader reveal for the end of the second episode, which to me is like such a, it's like okay, yeah, cool, you saved that, and it's great. It's a great moment of like the eyes in the tank, right? And we'll talk about that in the next episode. But and maybe you could have done it with, even without Vader. You could have done it with a different character. You could have done it with you know, a Moff or something like that, saying, you know, the like before they land, before the thing opens, a hologram explaining what they're there for. We've gotten reports of a Jedi on Tatooine that, you know, in a small outpost sort of thing, and then
Totally.
build even a little bit more tension of like, are they after Obi-Wan? Because I also think that one of the things, they break that tension way too quickly, that we see that it's not Obi-Wan that they're talking about. I mean, like, I also think it's important that we establish that, and then we cut to Obi-Wan, we see him cutting up the fish, and then the guy's like, well, this is only half of the pay. I've got a family, and then, you know, Obi-Wan kind of gives this big guy a look. He's like, you got something to say? Obi-Wan backs down, and like it is important for us in that moment to have had the moment previous with Nari where he can't help it. He has to scratch that itch. But then we see Obi-Wan is resisting that urge. He is staying hidden.
Mm-hmm.
In order to establish just how far he's fallen from his path. Because that's going to be the journey, is him getting back to it. But yeah, I don't know. Again, and this is a year later, and this is a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking a year later on, though they could have done this, they could have done that. But I do think that for the general audience, I think that there was those certain aspects that could have just set up those antagonists a little bit better, established who the Inquisitors were for a general audience, and then maybe we wouldn't have had quite as much of the sort of the tepid response to them. It is also unclear because the Grand Inquisitor is involved, and I wonder if having him in these opening scenes did a disservice to establishing Riva's character, because he kind of steals a little bit of the thunder, being that he's the Grand Inquisitor. And that might have, again, like they might have been going for a different perspective of like, well, everybody's going to think that this guy's the guy, and then we're going to switch it out. But then the marketing made it very
Yeah,
clear, right? The marketing made it super clear. Okay, he's not going to be in this very much. It's going to be her. It's her, Obi-Wan, and Vader. Like it's sort of it's their story, and of course they were keeping hidden the fact that Leia was going to be a massive part of the show. So, like it's really those four characters that it's about. So, yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting. I don't know. We have talked at this point a lot about the Inquisitors. So I think maybe we'll cut the Inquisitor chat there. We haven't done a very good
yeah,
job of like recapping the episode, but we have talked about a lot of it.
yeah. Totally. You want to talk about? We've talked about a little bit of Leia.
Yeah, I
Obi-Wan.
think we can talk about Alderaan a little bit and getting to see more of that. This is obviously the most that we've ever seen of Alderaan on screen is in this show,
Mm,
and it is also, I think, the most important time that we've gotten to spend with Bale. And it is really the only time we've ever gotten to spend with Breha Organa, Leia's mother. And what an important character she is in the life of that one of the central characters of the entire saga, one of the Skywalkers, right? Um,
for sure.
I love what they do with Leia in this. I mean, like, it is pitch perfect. Vivian Lyra Blair is just, I don't know, she's just magic. Like, it's the fact that she at this age is able to portray this character with such pinpoint accuracy. Um, it is as if Carrie is just like giving her notes. This is what you're gonna do. That's just it. I mean, I think Carrie Fisher was such a like singular personality. I I I don't know if you ever had the fortune and pleasure of seeing her in person, but I did multiple times. And she, like, just being in the same room as her was always an amazing experience. Like always, even though like it's so funny because I saw her in 2010 at Star Wars Celebration, and then again in 2012 at Star Wars Celebration, and I think in between, or either in between or shortly after, um at Fan Expo here in Vancouver. And I she tells all the same stories, and she makes all the same jokes at these things, right? Like at all three of these appearances that I saw her. Um and that's what she did. She had her shtick, and she was rehearsed and very good at it. Um and yet, like, it never mattered. Like every time she told the joke, you laughed like it was the first time you heard it, sort of thing. I she just had that about her. It was incredible. And so to see this kid show up and like from scene one, the sass, the back talk, the whole 9 yards. I mean, the scene where she eviscerates her cousin is just like, if you're not convinced at that point, you're not going to be convinced. Just turn it off and walk away. Don't bother watching this show, because to me, I watched that and I was just like, oh my god, like how did they? And this is here's the thing. I was familiar with this actress already. I was already familiar with Vivian Lyra Blair from the movie. I think it's called We Can Be Heroes. It's a I think
Mm.
it's a Robert Rodriguez. I don't remember if he directed it or if he just produced it, but I
Oh, he directed it. Yeah, I just looked it up.
yeah.
Yeah, he's.
So she played Guppy, the daughter of Shark Boy and Lava Girl,
Mm.
and I remember because that was 2020. That was like mid pandemic. Like, we're not going to the movie theaters. We're trying to keep these kids entertained. I remember watching it with the girls, and with Crystal, and Crystal and I being like, "This little girl is amazing." Like, the rest of this movie is kind of meh, whatever. I could care less, but this kid is like pure magic. Like, she should be in everything. Like, if you need a kid for something, put her in it. So when she shows up as Leia in Obi-Wan, I was just like, oh my god, I can't, like, and for her to just nail the character, it was just it's just it is so special. It is such a gift, as I said earlier. And the fact that there are people that look at it and go or don't like it, I just can't fathom it. I can't understand it. Like, it is one of those things, and I've said this a lot over the years, but this is maybe the number one thing. If you tell me that you did not like the Obi-Wan Kenobi series because you didn't like Little Leia, then I turn and I go, I don't know, maybe you just don't like Star Wars. Maybe you think that you like Star Wars, or maybe you liked a Star Wars movie at one point. But if you don't vibe with this kid in this role in this story, I I think it's time to accept that maybe you don't like Star Wars. I said that a lot during Star Wars Rebels. You go back to those Rebels podcast episodes. I said that a lot to people of like, you don't like this? I hate to break it to you. I don't think you're a Star Wars fan. Not like oh,
Yeah,
you're not allowed to be. It's like, no, like actually I think that you don't like Star Wars. I think that you maybe like the three movies that for a long time were Star Wars, but now are just a part of Star Wars, right? Star Wars is this massive thing now, and and it is the original trilogy, it is the prequel trilogy, it is the sequel trilogy, but it's not any one of those things. It's all three of those things together, and it's also the Clone Wars, and it's also Star Wars Rebels, and it's also Star Wars Visions, and like to me, like, that's one of the things. And Visions coming out, season 2 just came out. Like, this is one of the things for me with those, with Star Wars Visions. It reinforces that belief for me, because those stories are non-canonical, right? They don't necessarily fit anywhere in the timeline. Many of them make no sense if you want to try and like logically fit them into Star Wars. But they, all of them, even though not all of them vibe with me, not all of them are exactly my cup of tea or something that I want to watch. Especially in this second batch, season 2, like, it just, there's a bunch of them that, like, they're just not really my thing. They're very well done, but they're not really my thing. um they are absolutely 100% Star Wars, because Star Wars is a very big broad brush now. I've talked a lot over the last year about Andor, and me going like, it's missing these certain aspects and that sort of thing, but at the end of the day, it is Star Wars. It's still Star Wars. I mean, I
right.
think that I feel personally that it's Blade Runner with a Star Wars skin painted over it, which is all it takes, because Blade Runner and Star Wars are not that far apart. But but um, but it's still Star Wars, right? Like, it still falls under it. And if you're a fan of that stuff, if you're not a fan of Andor, I would equally say, I don't know if you're a fan of Star Wars. I don't like, because like this political stuff, this is Star Wars. Since the prequels, this is Star Wars. And if you don't like it, I don't know, man. I think there are other franchises out there that you might enjoy more. Fast and Furious is right there. Just go watch that. That's not a knock. I am one of the biggest Fast fans you'll find. So, I yeah, I mean,
But
like,
it is what it is.
but it is what it
It's that
is. It is what it is.
it's
Exactly.
that genre of like, just like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if a car did ...
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Don't worry
Um,
about don't worry about the don't worry about the politics of blowing up a major national international monument.
I still
It's
haven't seen the
it's
10th
fine.
one.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say anything else, but yeah, like if you want to just turn that part of your brain off and enjoy an action movie with some ridiculous special effects, those stories exist. Or I mean, like, no, I can't even, because like it's John Wick has so much of that stuff in it too. I don't know. I just find that people, um, they just there's a lot of people out there who say that they're Star Wars fans, but they just really don't get Star Wars. And I know that's not a popular thing to say because it sounds gatekeepy, but it's not. It is not. It's not me trying to gatekeep. It's just me trying to go like, listen, if you're not having fun at the party, leave the party. Because those of us who are having fun at the party, you're bringing us down, man. Like um
You almost
and every
quit.
once in a while, parts of the party suck. And I'm not one to shy away from that stuff, and we'll talk about it when that happens. This show is not that. It is not it. And certainly, like the two things that people complained about, Riva and Leia, are not the reasons why this show falls flat for some people. Um, I think like there's some execution stuff. I do think there's some budget stuff. You brought that up a little bit earlier. I do think that there's a little bit of budget stuff that's like, yeah, okay, they could have pumped a little bit more money into this and done it a little bit better. I also think that we're still in early days with the volume and figuring out how to use this thing, this piece of technology.
And COVID. They were filming during
Um,
COVID.
and COVID, yeah, it's a COVID show, right? So
It is a COVID show.
I, like there are aspects of it that 100%, yeah, you can kind of see the seams a little bit. You can see the wires, but
I never
I'm always of the mind like special effects are in service of getting the story told, and as long as the story gets told, I'll forgive bad special effects. You know, um,
real fast, not to go down to this
yeah.
path real fast, but I never heard any actual discourse regarding Leia. Was there any negative discourse regarding that? Because I mean, I didn't hear it, and not that I want to again go into that, but did
Yeah.
that ever happen?
There was a segment of people that just wanted a show. They just wanted 6 episodes of Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting. That's all they wanted. They just wanted Vader and Obi-Wan dueling for
Gotcha.
6
Okay.
hours straight. Um that's not what they would say to you. They would say that they want Star Wars the way that it's always been. Oh, kids are annoying, blah blah blah, right? Like they had their faux reasons, but the reality is that like that segment very specifically just wanted they just want that clip that surfaces every once in a while of like of Obi-Wan and Vader fighting on the Death Star, that like the
Hmm.
fan thing where the
Oh
guys
yeah,
like went in and made it like Duel of the Fates,
it bugs me
Battle of the
so
Heroes
much.
style.
Yeah,
And they go like, and it's always like accompanied with a caption of like, oh, this is what it should have been, or oh, like if you're gonna make a special edition, this is how you do it, that sort of thing. um the same people who just like lose their minds at the end of Rogue One when Vader just murders a hallway, um, or Luke mirroring that murders a hallway of Dark Trooper droids.
Dark Troopers. Yeah,
Um, like these individuals have a very myopic perspective on what Star Wars is, and they want it to fulfill their male power fantasies. And so a show that comes in that is about actually the the uh like, to put a very fine point on it, like the power of the goddess in our lives, the feminine sort of deity figure in rebirth, right? Like the way that all plays together. I am by no means an expert on this stuff. Go listen to Marie Claire on What the Force talk about this stuff, and she will get into it in much more depth and detail than I ever possibly could, because I am but a humble student of her, and her and Ty and Missy and these other incredible women that I've been lucky to surround myself with in my journey with Star Wars these last few years. But I think there are a lot of men who reject that idea in Star Wars, um, both on the fan side as well as on the creative side, and like they reject the feminine, they reject that goddess figure, and they don't want it in the story. And like Leia represents that. Leia has always represented that in
From the
Star
beginning.
Wars,
Yeah.
like from day one, and even as a child. Like that is the thing. That is the secret sauce of that character, is that she has this unlimited potential to shape the world around her, because she is tapped into the goddess, right? And then Riva is a character who, on the flip side of that, is detached from it and needs to come back to it, right? The same as
Mm.
Obi-Wan needs that. It Bale has the comment when he they make the emergency call after she's been taken. He says, Obi-Wan says, "My responsibility is to the boy," and Bale says, "What about your responsibility to her? She's just as important as he
Important.
is,"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? And which is like, that right there, Bale saying that was offensive to a certain type of Star Wars fan. The ones who get mad at The Last Jedi, the ones who are upset that Han Solo gave the Millennium Falcon to a girl, right? The ones that just, like, they can't handle women. They also don't like Captain Marvel. They also don't like, take your pick, right?
I bet
I
you that line was also on a whiteboard in the writer's room. And,
Yeah,
people forget, hey, Deborah Chow is
yeah,
the director
yeah,
of these episodes.
exactly,
So,
yeah,
like, this is where it was going to go always. And
yeah.
that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so like that to me, like that line, I love it when I say this all the time. I love it when a piece of art states its thesis so clearly,
Me too.
especially when it does it early in the story. And they do in this. That is the thesis of this whole thing. It's what it all revolves around, because it is not just, hey, Star Wars fans, Leia is just as important to the story as Luke. That's part of it. But it is also, Obi-Wan, this part of your character, this aspect of who you are, your compassion, your love, these things that you've abandoned because of what happened, because of the trauma that you experienced in Order 66, and in, you thought, killing Anakin, killing that part of yourself. I It's important, and you need to find it again. And Leia is the one who helps him find it again. And it is only because Leia helps him find it again that Obi-Wan is then able to help Riva find it as well. Right? Leia
Absolutely.
doesn't directly affect Riva in that way. Obi-Wan does. But it's only because he goes through this journey of this series that he's able to pass that to her, and rescue her, right? Um, so yeah, which then makes the confrontation with Vader that much more tragic for him, right?
Well, yeah, I
I
mean, these first 10 years of his
Yeah,
existence on Tatooine, he's been solely taking, just the responsibility over Luke.
I mean,
And
like let's put it
Luke,
into perspective. He's been living in a cave for 10 years, not even a
yeah,
home.
just a cave. Yeah,
That's where he's at. He's not taking care of himself. You know, a Jawa thinks he's disgusting. Um,
that's the bar. That's where we're at, guys.
exactly right, exactly, and that's why that like, and that's funny, but it's also an important thing in establishing
For sure.
where this character has fallen to. And then seeing the juxtaposition of that to the end of the series, right? Um, yeah, it's so important, and it is his connection um to the goddess, to the feminine, to that power, to compassion, love, nurturing, all of that stuff that we would consider feminine qualities. Like, these are the things that Obi-Wan has left behind. These are the things that he has abandoned. He hasn't embraced, like, because Anakin also has lost those things,
Right.
right? In losing Padme, he loses all of those things, but Anakin embraces the uh the dark aspects of masculinity, power, fear, strength, domination, all of these sorts of things, and becomes a monster, right? More machine than man.
Right.
But Obi-Wan loses his humanity and becomes a shadow, right? Like, that's when we see him in this first episode. That's what he is. And I love it. I love how it ends with. I mean, he states it. He says, "I'm not the man that I used to be. Like find somebody else. She'll be better off."
Right.
He really, really, truly believes that he has failed, and that he's incapable, right? And then the episode ends with the woman at the transport. It's like, well, are you
You
coming or
coming?
not, right? Um, and he has to make that decision. He literally has to cross that threshold at the end of this episode. It's just, it's not everything needs to be quite so clever. Sometimes the story can actually, like, present itself in a very straightforward and and simple way, and this first episode does. It's going to get more complex as we go, but this beginning of the his hero's journey, um it's very clear. It's very clear, but it's also a middle-aged man's hero's journey, so it's different from Luke's. um
It's finding himself again. It's
yeah,
him on Tatooine. For me, represents Anakin. It's
yeah,
Anakin where he grew up. He's been watching over Luke, and I mean we have a direct callback where he's pretending to race, like or fly,
yeah,
or it looks kind of like pod racing, but
yeah,
he cannot escape the Anakin of it all.
yeah,
And as soon as Leia returns into his kind of focus, it's almost like as if Padme and that side of his past is now returning, where she came from was more natural. There was, it was Naboo. It was, more lush and green, and there was water, and it's just going back to the feminine of it all, and that is what she represents. And it's like he needed that to get to where he will eventually become in New Hope.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. um yeah, I don't was there anything else in this episode that you wanted to cover? Or because I feel like we've kind of covered it. We're at an hour and a half now, so
Yeah, we got.
um
I have a couple little things, but again,
yeah,
there was
sure.
just like little like things where, if there was one thing I kind of missed, and this happens mostly in the some of the shows. Andor, I don't think does it either. I kind of missed the transitional wipes. That
Mm,
were popularized by Lucas and Star Wars and whatnot.
yeah,
Doesn't need to happen in all of the shows, so but I kind of missed them. Ewan is still amazing after all these years, and I just remember like again with the retrospective going back to the show because I have not seen it as much as you have. I think I may have seen it twice before, like seen every episode like once or twice. But I've never actually. I still have failed to like watch the entire like 6 hours and I still want to do that. Just like have an entire day just to
Yeah.
watch it all. I still fail that, and like going back to your point earlier, it would be nice to just do that because I think it does play better because as a, like a 5-6 hour movie. But I just remember just revisiting it, and like the first like 20 minutes, I found myself I think smiling like at least 3 times, just
Mhm.
and the Leia of it all. We talked about the Leia. Yeah, I just I do love the show. I am happy that it's that we're kind of going back to it, and I'm happy that if by the end of the day it finally exists, it's finally something that we can just go
Mhm.
back to. It's not something that we're because I mean we could kind of forget. I mean it's been a long time for since Revenge of the Sith, and ever since Revenge of the Sith, basically it's been like, oh man, what would it be kind of nice to see a show or a movie of Obi-Wan just in the desert, wallowing in despair and everything. And I get 6 hours of that. That's fine. But like,
Mhm.
I love how we actually have a purpose with this story, and it's
Yeah.
not just wallowing and not a hit on Andor or anything. But it's like if it was probably created by like Tony Gilroy, this would have been 6 hours of him
Mhm.
wallowing in the desert. And I don't know if that's necessarily a story that we need for this day and age, but um cinematography was fantastic. I love the day in the life montage that we basically got. We got kind of like 3 different days of him at work, and love the subtle cinematography where every time he's on his transport back to Mos Eisley, like every day we get a little bit closer to him. Like the first day it's pretty wide, second day it's a little bit closer, and then after everything that's been happening through the course of the episode, that third day we're like basically at a profile, just extreme close up on him. I just love that subtle cinematography so much. I will end my thoughts with basically, I guess, asking you a question like, what did you think of the music overall? I guess for this episode, did you love it? Did you struggle with it? I love the Obi-Wan theme,
Yeah.
but nothing really past that really honestly like got me. What did you think of the music overall?
I mean, I love it. The Obi-Wan theme has become one of my absolute favorite pieces of music in Star Wars. I I love the way that it's a it's a it's a lead in to the Force theme, which was Obi-Wan's theme I mean it's labeled as Obi-Wan's theme in A New Hope, right? In that
Mm,
soundtrack. But that theme has come to represent so much more than that one character. I mean, if it represents any character, it represents Luke. Um, but really, it represents the light side. It represents the Force, right? So this theme, Obi-Wan's theme in this show, in the way that quite it never quite hits that high
never
that the
resolves.
yeah, like it just kind of it's just always kind of building. And then there's that little hint of the Clone Wars. There's that little hint of like a militaristic like a march throughout it that is that's like that's the threat of Anakin of
Mm,
Vader throughout.
okay.
Um that's the John Williams piece, right?
Right.
The other side of this, the other part of the score, um, I really like the theme for Leia. Um, it's uh, it feels a lot more prequel-y to me. Like the Obi-Wan theme feels very original trilogy, um, but that Leia theme has a bit of the sort of happier prequel vibes. Um, but it's also just kind of its own thing. It's this other period of life. It's the rest of the galaxy is in a very bad place, but
Hmm.
Leia is like Luke, uh, uh, a, a ray of light. She's um man, how did we not know that Ray was like this is the central character? She's Ray, light side, get it?
Yeah,
Um
get it.
I but she like Leia represents that. She is hope for the future. And her theme is upbeat and represents that very, very well. So I do think that like they did a very good job of that. I would have liked for Riva to have something a little bit more signature, so, like a little bit more of
Agreed.
a leitmotif for her, that could carry through, or even just the Inquisitors having their own. But that is also an aspect of like, there's not really, that doesn't really exist in general. And everybody, that one's hard because it's so hard to do anything other than the Imperial March. Michael Giacchino, who is, after John Williams, my favorite composer, I tried so hard on Rogue One to create some Empire vibes that were different, but like recognizable from the Imperial March. And there's good stuff in there, but it's not. I personally think Rogue One is possibly his weakest score, which
Really
kills me
interesting.
because he's one of my favorite composers. Like I said, after John Williams, he's my favorite. I love his music so much. The choices that he makes. I mean, the Doctor Strange soundtrack is one of my favorite scores of all time.
Same here. Yeah.
It's so good.
My daughter was
And
actually humming that today, so I
well,
was really
yeah,
proud of
that's awesome.
her.
Um,
But
and Lightyear is a movie that I could take or leave. I don't particularly think that it's great. It misses the mark in a lot of ways that I wanted that film to go. But that score, his music in that is like, oh, so good. But Rogue One, which is a very good movie, it's not my cup of tea. Anybody who's listened to me for a long time knows that it's not my favorite. It's actually like pretty low on my list of Star Wars movies. But Michael Giacchino doing a Star Wars score should have been a slam dunk for me. But also, he had 6 months because it was somebody else and they dropped out, and he came
I
in.
heard I thought it was 6 weeks.
Maybe it's 6 weeks. You might be right. It was probably 6 weeks. He had no time at all and threw together what he did. And like that, considering that, it's a pretty impressive score. But he did not have the time that he would have had on other projects. I think you're right. It's 6 weeks.
I think
Um,
he. I did see. I slightly disagree because I loved his. I did love his Imperial theme. I love the space battle. The entire like third act. I thought he nailed. And then I also appreciated that because we never got because Vader had a theme in the original film
yeah,
that never came back because it was in basically by the time you get to the Empire Strikes Back, you get the Imperial March and how you're gonna use the other theme. But he brought that theme back from A New Hope
he did.
into
He
Rogue
did.
One because that was kind of the same era. So I appreciated that. And lastly, he had, I want to say it was Jin's theme was very reminiscent to a leitmotif that Williams had in the original film. Yeah, you could kind of hear it when Obi-Wan and Luke are in the excuse me, Obi-Wan and Luke are in the hut, and he just got the message from Leia, and the music basically during the scene where he's like, "I can't get involved. I got work to do." That whole moment, there's Jin's theme was birthed out of that scene.
Mhm.
So I appreciated all that stuff, and that's interesting that it's your least favorite. I didn't know that.
It's yeah, and it's also like my least favorite Star Wars score. Um I do not listen to that music. Actually, you know what? That's not true. That's not true. I would have said that a few years ago. I Rise of Skywalker
Rise of
is
Skywalker.
not a particularly good score.
Nope.
It's there is one moment in Rise of Skywalker that stands out for me, and that is an amazing piece of composition by John Williams. The rest of it feels like a lot of retreading and a lot of like just the same stuff from the previous two movies. Um, but it's not included in the soundtrack. It's in the movie, but it's not in the soundtrack. It drives me nuts. The moment when Ben comes to Exegol and Ben and Ray are reunited, and it plays the heroic version of the Kylo Ren theme is one of my favorite pieces of music in all of Star Wars. As a matter of fact, in the entirety of that absolute Bantha Poodoo film, that moment, like when I think about it, like I don't like The Rise of Skywalker. I actively dislike that movie. It does have some redeeming qualities. I do think that the first act is pretty solid. Everything up until they leave Poseidon, up until she destroys the shuttle, is pretty good. Like it's pretty okay. It's pretty okay. Third act, or sorry, first act of the third act of a Star Wars, right? And then is after that everything just falls apart and just gets worse and worse and worse. The second they pick up the dagger, I think the movie falls apart. Because everything, like, because this, I guess it's not the second they pick up the dagger. It really is. It really is. They get out of the snake cave, and yeah, she ends up blowing up the ship and thinks that she's killed Chewie. And it's just like from that moment forward, the movie just slowly falls apart, like, cotton candy in the rain.
Right.
Not slow at all. Very quickly.
I'm gonna do you a favor, and maybe should stop talking about Rise of
No,
Skywalker because
but
we should.
yeah, but that but
'Cause-
that one moment, like that one moment in the score, it gets me every single time. Like it makes that movie worthwhile for me. Like like that one moment is such a redeeming quality. But Rogue One, I don't like that score. I just don't listen to it. Like it's not a score, and I listen to so much of the rest of Star Wars. But that was one that I just can't do it, man. I just can't do it. It just doesn't work for me as like on its own. It's great in the movie. It's all fine in the movie, but it's just not.
Mhm.
Those pieces of music to me just don't stand on their own. Um they're a little bit earwormy. The thing for me about the Obi-Wan score, to bring it back to Obi-Wan, is um it it serves the story. I think more than anything. There's an over reliance on the Obi-Wan theme, which is an interesting aspect of the production because it came in very late. It was not originally, like, John Williams was not originally going to compose anything for it.
Right.
The original composer was, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm blanking on her name.
Natalie Holt.
Yeah, Natalie Holt, thank you, who did the score on
Loki.
Loki. And that's, I think Loki, like, I think Doctor Strange has the best score in the MCU, but
Mhm.
after that, it's Loki. Loki is number 2 for me. Like the score to Loki is like, I can't wait for that show to come back. And one of the reasons is that, like, that music, that opening theme gets you right into that show. It gets you right into the headspace of like, what's this show? Like, what are we doing here? Um, I mean, like, what an incredible composer. And then a lot of her stuff doesn't, I think, make it into the show. It's in there, but I'm trying to remember, somebody else came in. Let me
William Ross,
yeah,
who's
thank you.
so William Ross is a collaborator of John Williams, and I think he usually does the compositions when he's, say, not around, or I think
Yeah.
he's based out of LA as well. But yeah, William Ross has been around. I mean, I think the first time I remember him being around was, and he was, I think, working with Williams before this, but when I really got into uh, musical scores and soundtracks
Mm.
and whatnot, the first time I read that name was in the Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, where 2002 was like a landmark year for Williams. He was doing Minority Report, Attack of the Clones, Harry Potter, whatnot. So like he was just slammed that year, and William Ross ended up like doing most of Chamber of Secrets off of Williams' work and whatnot. So he's like a huge collaborator with him.
Mm.
But Natalie, so like going back to what you're saying about Natalie Holt, like I agree with you about like Loki. It was so great, but then like I don't know if it's, again, going back to that budget thing. I don't know if like most of the tracks that I've heard, and when I listen back when I watch the show, it feels like it's like the orchestra's maybe half full, half empty, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't know if that's a production thing with COVID or budget or something, but there is something I feel just missing out of the overall score, aside from the Obi-Wan theme. Like the Obi-Wan theme, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not trying to like bash on her or anything. It's just a feeling that I get.
Yeah.
So not to end the episode on a downer,
No, not
but
at all. I mean, I think it's interesting. There, I don't, I think that she probably had, because if I remember right, some of the reports that we got sort of as the series was coming out or after even, she had basically scored the whole thing, and then they came in the 11th hour with William Ross and replaced a bunch of it because John
mm,
Williams had done this Obi-Wan theme. So they came in and they like slammed the Obi-Wan theme into a bunch of places. And I would be really interested to hear what her Obi-Wan theme had been. Because the Leia theme is hers. A lot of the themes that are in it are hers, but it's almost a little bit disjointed. So I wonder how much of like that, like her Obi-Wan theme is in those other character, like those other moments, but we don't realize it because we didn't get the establishing theme that she wrote for Obi-Wan, right? So it's a weird aspect there of like two composers, really three, um, that are creating the score for this show, but not working together necessarily. That it's yeah, it's a very interesting aspect to the way that the score came together on this. So I don't know. It is one of those things, but I will say, like, I will put on the Obi-Wan soundtrack and like I'll listen to it from start to finish. I and like I love it. Like it's one of the few Star Wars soundtracks that I'll do that with. Most of the time when I'm listening to Star Wars music, it's like a playlist where I've pulled out my favorite stuff. Um, but
right.
like I I think like it's funny because many of them are not actually even John Williams ones. The solo soundtrack is just
So good.
it's so good from start to
I
finish.
want John Powell to return to
Yeah,
Star Wars
yeah, I
so
want him to
badly
do more
because
Star Wars as well because
he
he
was,
like his
yeah,
his stuff in that movie is so good, such strong stuff. I love the percussiveness of it. It's so
everything he
strong.
does percussion wise
Yeah,
is, I mean, he comes
so
from
good.
Shrek and Jason Bourne,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Jason Bourne especially, it just lives in that percussion.
His Chewbacca theme, his Chewbacca theme in Solo is just like it. Again, it's one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars music, and I love the Han Solo theme, the John Williams one, as well. Right, The Adventures of Han Solo. I love it.
Right.
It is in fact the theme music to this show that was composed by Christy Carew. The note that I gave her is like, I want my own version of that. Like that, that's it. And and she nailed that. So I have my own version of like a Han Solo, Adventures of Han Solo theme. So I yeah, but I yeah, it's like that. Return of the Jedi is a score that I will listen to from front to back. Um, and then Obi-Wan, like that's kind of, actually I guess that's kind of it. The rest of them, like, I just pull them apart. Like these couple of songs out of Phantom Menace, these couple from
Phantom.
Attack of the
I was
Clones,
about to
that
say
sort of thing.
Phantom Menace is probably one of my favorite scores overall. Empire Strikes Back, but yeah, Phantom Menace. I mean, especially again going back to that age of growing
Yeah,
up. The Darth Maul, the Duel of the Fates is so formative. But again, we could talk about that
yeah,
in the
yeah.
future episodes.
For
But
sure. I mean, anytime
well,
anybody has
good
anything bad
times.
to say about the Phantom Menace, I just go to the soundtrack and I go like, this is the best music in the entire saga. So, yeah, yes, the Force theme is great, and wonderful and timeless. The Imperial March is uh impossible to top, but has been overused throughout the years. And there's some great stuff in the sequels as well. The March of the Resistance is great. Rey's theme is like a top 5 piece of music
For
in
sure.
Star Wars. But like, man, Duel of the Fates, Can we just like it has nothing to do with Obi-Wan? I mean, I guess it's something to do with Obi-Wan because it was used in the marketing really heavily. Duel of the Fates is the best piece of Star Wars music there is.
Thank you.
It just is. It just is. And like that's
Thank you.
because it's associated so heavily with the Phantom Menace, I think that people will like bristle at that. And because it is, I mean, it's not modern Star Wars at this point. The prequels are vintage. They're retro. But like I maybe actually that's the reason why we can say it now, right? Is that like we are like what we're like 20, we're almost 25 years after the Phantom Menace. Next year will be 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's time for us to all just acknowledge the reality that the Duel of the Fates is the best piece of music in all of Star Wars, and nothing else I think even comes close. Like it is such an amazing piece of music. It does everything that you need a piece of score to do. I mean, like it is operatic. It is so evocative. It just takes you the second from the
Mm.
first three notes.
Yep.
You are there. You are
Yep.
like you. It is impossible if you have seen that movie to not immediately picture Darth Maul igniting that double-bladed lightsaber and then Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon with theirs and then like let's go. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. It is impossible. And like there are other pieces of Star Wars music that I think are evocative in the same way, but not to that degree. Like that takes it and cranks it to 11 and breaks the knob clean off. It's and nothing else I think comes close to it, right? The Force theme and Luke looking out at the sunset would be would be as close as you get in second place. But then like this is the thing, the Imperial March is an amazing piece of music. It's beautiful and it's perfect and it does exactly what it needs to do in the story. But like, is there a singular moment that you think of with the Imperial March? No, you just think about Darth Vader. You think about the character. It's so tied to that character,
Yeah.
even though it's not technically his theme. But it's not evocative in the same way. It's evocative of a character and a vibe and of a feeling, but not of a specific moment, right? Whereas, and then again with Rey's theme, similar. It like I am like it immediately takes me to that character, but it doesn't immediately take me to a moment. Um, but yeah, Duel of
With
the
Ray's
Fates.
theme, I always think of her going down that dune with
Yeah,
the piece of scrap. But no, you're right. I mean, Darth Maul. Um, that's the one thing that I think they kind of play with it a little bit in the prequels, where in like say Attack of the Clones when they reprised it, it was while Anakin was
mm-hmm.
searching for his mother, so that was nice. And then during the battle between Palpatine and Yoda, so that was nice
Yeah,
again. But I think in the zeitgeist, it's more influenced by just Darth Maul, and
yeah,
we hear that in Solo when he has his moment, and we hear subtle. John Powell again does that subtle nod to Williams with the Duel of the Fates theme in the background, and not necessarily. I'm not saying that it should have necessarily been reused in Obi-Wan in the show Obi-Wan, but there's a in future episodes we could talk about it.
it
But I really did miss Battle of the Heroes.
yeah. Battle of the Heroes would have been good. Duel of the Fates doesn't necessarily apply in Obi-Wan, right? Because
Right.
Duel of the Fates, Dave Filoni, it's
Oh
Dave Filoni,
yeah.
right? He's got the breakdown of it
Oh
where
yeah.
he explains what Duel of the Fates, like what that title means.
Right.
It's not, it's not Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul. It's not the light side versus the dark side. It's literally like it is the battle of like the light side and the dark side over the fate of Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
If Qui-Gon survives, Anakin doesn't fall to the dark side. The Sith don't return, right? That's the reality of that. And every time that we hear that piece of music, it is at an integral point where the light side and the dark side are fighting for the soul of Anakin Skywalker, right? That first one is obviously in the main Duel of the Fates, the battle between the Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Maul, right? For the future of
Right.
Anakin, who's going to train him, right? I Second is, well, as you said, when we see him on the speeder on Tatooine, it's an internal struggle, but it is the light side and the dark side inside of Anakin. Which one is going to come out on top? And we know the dark side comes out on top. It once again wins the fight. And then in the third instance, it is Yoda and Palpatine. And it is, again, like, if Palpatine is defeated, maybe Anakin can be rescued, right?
Right.
But if Palpatine wins, then Anakin's lost, because Anakin will become Vader, right? Anakin, if Obi-Wan defeats Anakin on Mustafar and Palpatine is also defeated, then that's it. Anakin is saved in a different way, but he is saved, right? He doesn't become Vader. He doesn't go on to live a life of torment that then causes pain and suffering for others, right? He's not saved in his own, like, for him, but the galaxy is saved from him in a way, right?
Right.
So those are the three times. I don't the thing about this series is that at no point are we fighting to save Anakin. There is a brief moment where Obi-Wan has a feeling that maybe he can save Anakin, and he gives him the chance, right? And we'll talk about it when we get to the final episode. He gives him
Right.
an opportunity, and then Vader confirms for Obi-Wan. I mean, like, he's there. Vader is lying to himself, and Obi-Wan is not willing to fight that fight anymore. So and it's got to go the way that's got to go in order for everything else to happen. So it's fine, but Obi-Wan is not necessarily interested in redeeming Anakin. He does give him a chance. He does give him the briefest chance of, like, it's not too late. I'm sorry. And to which Vader is like, no, you have nothing to apologize for. You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did. I
So good.
that's Anakin has decided. Anakin's not there. It's Vader, right? Like, we're 100% Vader. We are not fighting for the fate of Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
In Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's actually flipped, right? We're actually fighting for the fate of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and whether the light side or the dark side prevails, represented by Leia and Reva, right? Whether or not the light side or the dark side prevails, it determines the course of the rest of the galaxy through Obi-Wan. Because if Obi-Wan is defeated, right, if the dark side wins, something happens to Leia, or Reva doesn't turn back to the light and does actually kill Luke, right? I mean, like, that, then everything is lost, and Obi-Wan would be lost, and it's all over. The galaxy is lost. I mean, eventually, something would happen. The Force finds a way, but I the fate of the galaxy as we understand it would have been completely altered, right? Um, so it's really yeah, it's not about the duel of the fates for Anakin. So it would need to be something different. It needs to be something different. So I think it's the right call not to use the duel of the fates in this series. And when I see those cuts where people cut it with the music of, like, Duel of the Fates and Battle of the Heroes, I hate it. I hate it in the same way that I hate that the fan video of, like, oh, but what if the fight between Vader and Obi-Wan on the Death Star was this badass? And it's like, listen, my favorite lightsaber duel in all of Star Wars is Darth Maul versus Obi-Wan on Tatooine. It's the best duel in the entire series, as far as I'm concerned.
It's really the most realistic. I mean, let's be honest.
Because it is, like, that is a Jedi Master and a Sith Lord at the height of their powers. And it is
Wait,
like
yeah.
that is Obi-Wan exemplified. Like, as much as, you know, Mace Windu's the greatest swordsman, Yoda's the
Mm.
greatest swordsman, Anakin is like, they're all very good at all of these flashy things. Obi-Wan Kenobi is the greatest swordsman in the history of the Jedi, as far as we know at this point, because he won that fight with one of the most formidable foes that we've ever seen in Star Wars. Darth Maul is terrifyingly proficient with a lightsaber, right? And he defeats Darth Maul in 3 moves. But he defeats Darth Maul in 3 moves because of the millions of moves that he does before anything even happens, and it's all
Mm-hmm.
exemplified in that. So he puts out the lightsaber. He ignites his lightsaber. He takes his Form 3 stance, and then he alters it. He goes to a Form 1, and then no, he goes. What does he do? He goes from Form 3, right, from his classic Obi-Wan, from Revenge of the Sith, right?
Yeah, he
Which,
goes for. So I'll be honest, I never actually studied the actual forms because I
yeah,
always thought they
he
weren't really canon, quote unquote. But then
yeah
I know the
he
poses.
moves
He
it.
poses
He
as
moves into
he goes from
Form
Obi-Wan.
2. Yeah, he moves into Form 2, which is power, right? In order
Mm,
to fight Maul, okay, which is the
okay.
lightsaber right in front of him, which is the form that he uses against Vader and that Vader uses against him on the Death Star.
Right. Is that form 2? You said.
Yeah, that's Form 2.
Okay,
Um,
interesting.
which is Vader's. I mean, that's Anakin and Vader's signature style. It's 2 hands, and it's like it's directly in front of you. It's the most aggressive stance in of all of the stances. And then he
Two
moves
hands.
into
Yeah,
Form 1, which was Qui-Gon, right? Where he pulls
yeah,
the
the shoulder.
lightsaber back next to him.
Mm,
And he does it to goad Darth Maul, right? I mean, I've talked about this
mm-hmm.
on so many podcasts, and this isn't just me talking about it. This is like a million people talking about it. But he moves into Form 1. I'm pretty sure it's Form 1, which is Qui-Gon. I know for a fact, like, it's Qui-Gon. He moves into the stance that Qui-Gon takes against Darth Maul in the final few blows when Darth Maul kills Qui-Gon, right? And Maul changes his stance to match because they're like it's a taunt, right? Obi-Wan
Mm-hmm.
moves into that move because he moves from like himself, or at least who he used to be, right, in that Form 3 stance, which is the defensive stance, which is his signature, um and then realizes, like, I can't defeat you with the old method. So he kind of goes into like something that's a little bit more like what he would use to fight Vader, which is now informed by the Obi-Wan Kenobi series because he has fought Vader, right? So he moves into that
Yeah.
stance, and then but then he realizes, I can't defeat you with power. It's not going to work. He's because Maul is too much finesse. You can't defeat him with power. So then he moves into Qui-Gon's in order to goad him, because he knows that the number one thing that you can count on with a Sith, the thing that he's going to confront Vader with when he sees him again, is pride, right? So he moves him into a position of like, do it again. Come on. Like, kill me the same way you killed my master. And Darth Maul takes the bait because he can't not. He's a slave to that, right? He's a slave to the dark side. And he does. And Obi-Wan knows exactly how to defeat him in that moment, right? Which is actually like mirrored in the fight that he has with Vader at the end of the series. So we'll talk more about that when we get there. But there
So
like
good. It's so good.
Obi-Wan is the greatest swordsman because it's not about the moves that you make, it's about all of the moves that you didn't. And that's like the samurai thing, right? Like, and that's why I go to that fight and I'm like, this is the best lightsaber duel in the entire saga, because it is the most samurai sword fight in all of Star Wars. And it's perfect. It is.
Did you feel that when you first saw it?
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
That's awesome. It took me like three viewings of just the scene like over and over. I think in a matter of like 12 hours
Yeah.
to finally like I think I get it. I think I get it. But I'll be honest, the first time I saw it, I think I was by myself and I, I was disappointed. But like I'm almost like ashamed to admit it now because it is like it's one of my
Yeah.
favorite fight scenes ever. But it was a process for me. It's almost like the Mandalorian episode that we reviewed together.
Yeah.
And it was a process a little bit, but yeah,
Yeah, and that's sort of the way that it has to be sometimes because we bring our own baggage to it, right? But
of
for
course,
for me, what it does is it establishes Obi-Wan could have defeated Vader on the Death Star. He could have. He didn't.
especially after the show. Yeah,
Obi-Wan knew from the moment that he stepped foot off of the Millennium Falcon onto the deck of the Death Star. He was like, "I'm not leaving." And he was resolved and he was fine with it because it was no longer his story. It was no longer his journey. It was about Luke and Leia. And again, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, this is the best Star Wars. Great Star Wars makes other Star Wars better. Now when we watch A New Hope, before when we watched A New Hope, when we see that moment, he looks over and he smiles at Luke. It's
Mm.
Luke is now the future of the Jedi. I can do this. Like I will do this. I will sacrifice myself. It will secure their escape. I've held off Vader long enough that like Luke will carry on. He will destroy the Death Star. He will defeat Vader. He will defeat the Emperor. Now, I mean, Obi-Wan doesn't know exactly how all that's going to play out, but he knows in that moment that that's what's going to happen.
I
Now
thought you
that
were
we
going to
have the
mention
Obi-Wan
Leia.
Kenobi series, it's not just that.
There you go. Okay.
He looks over and he sees Luke and Leia together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is in that moment that he goes, I'm done. It's not me anymore. And the most important thing that I can do now is give them the opportunity to escape. Vader won't pursue. I mean, like, and he doesn't know that Vader has a plan and all of that stuff. But but yeah, like that, like he but I firmly believe that he could have done the same thing to Vader that he did to Maul. And I mean, like the end of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, like he could have killed Vader in that moment too, and he chooses not to. Right? He chooses mercy. Because he has to for himself, right?
Yeah, he's not going to kill him.
Yeah. So, yeah, like it's stuff like that like these shows and the additional stories with Obi-Wan. It's like it makes all of that stuff in A New Hope so much more powerful for me. That's that is the best gift that any Star Wars can give is to make you feel deeper and love even more the other Star Wars that we have, right? And eventually something will come along and it'll fix Rise of Skywalker, and it'll make me go back and look and go, yeah, okay, I can live with this. I
Ray's
don't
coming back, guys.
know. Yeah,
Ray's coming back.
yeah, well, yeah, um,
But yeah, for sure, I agree with you on that. I mean, what a better way to have just retrospectively having just Leia when Luke says, "I'm here to rescue you. I'm here with Ben Kenobi." Ben Kenobi, where is he?
yeah,
Like now we know. Like, and we've always known that Leia had some sort of history, whether it was an actual like relationship or at least hearing through stories of Obi-Wan Kenobi. But
yeah,
now we know it's so much more personal.
yeah,
And what you said it, dude. It's a gift
yeah.
that we have this, and this is what this show has brought us. So like, let's enjoy it. Let's enjoy this show for what it is. And I'm not saying it as a hit to the show. It's like it's a great show. It's
No,
so
I
good.
like that's the thing is that it is so well done. It is so expertly put together. Deborah Chow is so amazing. Um, and yet you do have a bunch of people that like that look this gift horse in the mouth and don't acknowledge how incredibly special this story is. It drives me absolutely nuts, dude. It makes me crazy that there are people who are like, not for me. And it's like, really? What do you do? I don't know what you're doing here. I don't know what you want Star Wars to be if you don't want it to be this. And then Andor comes out a couple months after this, and I'm like, oh, this is what you guys want. You want to be depressed and anxious and feel bad about everything. The only thing it's missing is Darth Vader murdering people in a hallway. And it would be the perfect show for a bunch of people. It's so far from what I need in Star Wars. So far from what I need Star Wars to be. And Andor is great. It is fantastic. It's a phenomenal show. But it is so far from what I need Star Wars to be. Because I need my Star Wars to be weird. I need it to be out there. I mean, like we talked about it. We talked about it in the episode that you were on for Mando, right? Like that's what I need Star Wars to be. I need it to be
Jack Black and Lizzo.
Oh man. And like in all of the ways that matters. And if you disagree with me, go back and listen to me talk about it on that episode, and go listen to some other smart people talk about that episode. That episode is a work of art. It is a masterpiece.
There's a droid morgue, guys. There's a droid morgue.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. Awesome. Well, you know what? Let's wrap it up there. We are over 2 hours. I
sorry I keep doing this to you, man.
No, hey, this is what it is, man. It's what it is. It's what we do. It's awesome. Star Wars podcast, guys. Yeah, we'll be back next week to talk about part 2. And we'll be continuing on 6 weeks of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we hope that you guys will join us. I hope that everybody enjoyed our conversation on this one. It's gonna listen. This is just conversation. You've hopefully already seen these episodes at least once by the time that you're listening to us. It's not about spoiler warning recaps and stuff. Yeah, spoilers. We didn't say anything at the beginning. We were spoiling the whole season.
Yeah.
As well as Andor and whatever else. But yeah, that's it for this one. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Marty, for joining me on this Obi-Wan Kenobi retrospective.
Anytime.
Yeah, we'll be back next week with another episode. So thanks for listening. We'll see you then. Thank you for listening to Thunderquack Force Perspectives. Our opening theme is composed for us by Christy Carew. Follow Force Perspectives on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ForcePOV. And join us on Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord. Support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/thunderquack to get early access to episodes, leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast service, or buy merch at store.thunderquack.com. Force Perspectives is a part of the Thunderquack Podcast Network.